Hi everyone, welcome back to Visually Hidden Selects. I'm Peter O'Brien, and today I would like to talk to you about The Godfather from 1972, directed and co-written for the screen by Francis Ford Coppola, and starring Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, James Caan, John Cazale, Talia Shire, Robert Duvall, and Diane Keaton. This film is based on a novel of the same name written by Mario Puzo and first published in 1969, and the novel is very well written and translates very nicely to the screen. And Mario Puzo was hired as the screenwriter, but when Coppola came on board, he worked with Mario to finesse the screenplay and make the story a little bit more digestible while remaining true to all of the elements in the story that they wanted to bring to the screen. Because Mario Puzo was a novelist and not a screenwriter. Francis Ford Coppola had very recently won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for the film Patton, and so he just applied his skills on the page as well as behind the camera. And Francis Ford Coppola wasn't even the first choice for the director. He wasn't even the second or third choice. In fact, Sergio Leone, who directed the spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood, was originally offered the chance to direct this film, but they pursued the right talent that could really represent the meaning behind the story without turning it into a farce or something that may be considered derogatory or insincere to the material as well as the audience. And in all honesty, this film really is a true epic in terms of its scope. It has a very heavy reputation that can seem kind of overwhelming, but once you're in it, it's truly captivating because it hits on so many different levels. Previous gangster films focused on the glamour of the lifestyle or the violent criminal elements, and The Godfather really kind of delved a little bit deeper into the psychology of the characters and their motivations, and it just took the storytelling up to another level, which allowed it to be understood and accepted universally by audiences. And there are a lot of deep themes that are explored throughout this film, such as sins of the father, rising to one's destiny, the American dream, and really the film is kind of a criticism on American capitalism. There's a great line delivered by Robert Duvall's character where he says, "This is business, it's not personal." And that is also kind of an interesting little critique on this story and on the idea of what's explored throughout it, because yes, it is business, it's not personal, but we're looking at it through a very focused, personal lens of this family, the Corleone family. It's kind of just showing that idea, even though it's separate, it's inseparable. With all of these themes present in the story, it really kind of plays out almost like a tragedy, whether it be Shakespearean or even a Greek tragedy, because these characters, they start out on this high pedestal, and just throughout the course of the film, which takes place over several years, you just get to see how those pillars weather their storms, and some of them crumble and some of them fall. And so it really is just, again, very captivating story about an American family. One of the things that I love about this film, technically speaking, is the cinematography and how it explores some of these themes through the juxtaposition of light and dark. A great example of this is the opening sequence, which is commonly known as the wedding scene, but really it's a sequence. It is a 30-minute chunk of the movie. It's approximately 1/6 of the film. And on one hand, you have this bright, beautiful summer wedding happening out in the garden, but it's intercut with these darker scenes that take place in Don Corleone's office, where he's handling his day-to-day affairs and his wheelings and dealings, and you get to see the kind of business that he actually runs, in addition to the front business of his olive oil company. Because even within those scenes, the light is playing with illumination, shadows, and darkness. and it's all very reminiscent of the realistic paintings by Caravaggio, so it's a very picturesque film in its own way. My maternal grandmother was actually an extra in the wedding scene. She worked at Fordham University, and one of her friends who lived on Arthur Avenue in the Bronx knew somebody who was looking for extras to be in this film being shot out in Staten Island. And so she signed up to do it, and her and all of her friends were bussed every day down to Staten Island to be an extra in the wedding scene for The Godfather. I've looked for her over the years, and I feel like she might be actually standing behind Al Pacino while he's relaying who Luca Brasi is to Kay, played by Diane Keaton, at the wedding. With a running time that's close to 3 hours, there is a lot of story here, and so there are a lot of scenes. I don't know that I could pick out a favorite, but if I had to pick one, it's probably when Michael decides to help out the family. And I'm not going to spoil anything for those of you who haven't seen it, but it is a very engaging sequence that has quite the piece of cinematic punctuation at the end of it. And then it kind of is also a turning point for the entire story, not just Michael's character. An honorable mention for my other favorite scene would be when Sonny tunes up his brother-in-law Carlo, which is incredibly satisfying, but also opens up a can of worms for the narrative. And when it comes to the cast of the film, I mean, really, it is one of the greatest casts ever assembled, headed by Marlon Brando, who was really at the top of his game, and Al Pacino, who was just coming into films. He was really a New York stage actor. He was not the favored choice by pretty much anyone except for Francis Ford Coppola and the producer Al Ruddy, but the studio was looking at people like Jack Nicholson, Ryan O'Neal, even James Caan was kind of the backup for Michael before Al Pacino was secured in the role. But Marlon Brando, I don't really know what could be said about Marlon Brando at this point that hasn't already been said. But this film is kind of significant in his filmography because he actually had to work for scale and he had to put up a bond ensuring that he wouldn't pull anything that would delay the production or keep it off schedule. And to his credit, he really delivers, and even more so to his credit, he won the Oscar for Best Actor for this film, and he declined to accept it. He actually returned it to the Academy, which was the second time that had happened after George C. Scott had won for Patton a year or so before. The film did go on to win Best Picture of 1972, as well as Best Adapted Screenplay for Francis Ford Coppola and Mario Puzo. Several of the cast members were also nominated in supporting roles, none of which they won because they kind of canceled each other out in terms of the voting. But it's just remarkable the amount of talent that was able to come together to execute this film. And part of it was probably because they were filming in New York and in New York City, so they had access to an otherwise untapped pool of talent, not only in terms of the theater community and television community, but also just in terms of local talent. This film really is pretty significant, and it is highly regarded as one of, if not the greatest film ever made, simply because it is firing on all cylinders across the board. And as I mentioned before, the story itself is captivating on the page of the novel, but when it's brought to life in vivid color, through light and shadow and darkness, it really paints a very unique portrait of a story that, while it's relatable and accessible, it is also a very kind of closed-door story that we as an audience are allowed to kind of peek behind, even for just a glimpse of the inner workings of this family and their business. So that's it for The Godfather. I really hope you like this recommendation, and please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future selections. If you do watch The Godfather, leave us a comment and let us know what you think of the film. We will be discussing it at length on the next Visually Hidden Selects podcast, so be sure to tune into that. And until next time, see ya.